hence the paradigm about the empirical method, the general paradigm became intellectually accepted and fashionable about the empirical method was, I think, a fallout from this stage of scientific progress. What that had resulted in was that even you recall that the new disciplines of sociology and anthropology emerged at about the same time in the academia, and they were really, I think, a corollary of this emerging empiricism as a paradigm, as an accepted, unquestioned paradigm. Now, what that meant was that the questioning concerning man, which in the past had been in the purview of philosophizing, philosophy was the only method available earlier on, coupled with the historical method, the historico-philosophical method of trying to understand man. Of course, it had its severe limitations, and but that was all that was available. But now, in this time, in the latter half of the 20th century, the accent shifted from philosophy and history to anthropology and sociology. I, as one who was practically involved with the revolutionary process, clearly found that to be very unsatisfactory. You see, the new methodologies of looking at man, the derivatives of science, were all right for setting up specific projects concerning the human condition, whatever their source of funding or motivation might be. But nevertheless, they were addressing human issues. As they gathered momentum, they also acquired a sense of being activists. So you had this rather lethal combination of activism and empiricism. By now we have a record of their performance of this, of the practical results of this new approach. And I dare say that it is far from satisfactory. It may have comforted some donor governments that they were doing something. It may have enabled them to show to their own people and others generally. It may have enabled those governments to find some takers in the third world, particularly, who were happy to sow the seeds of this new methodology in the third world. Their record was far from satisfactory. Even intellectually, when I examined it, it was clear to me that this can't be satisfactory scientifically, because they're not asking questions about the causes of those problems. They're looking at the problems as existing facts and addressing them directly. They're, in other words, addressing the symptoms, the manifestations, and not the causes. The reason was obvious, because the causes were not susceptible to the empirical method, because empirical data was simply not available in that area. And here the methodology translated into restricting your inquiry to that area which was within the reach of the empirical method, and stop your inquiry there. So obviously it was unsatisfactory. So I was not going to buy that, and I did not. But at the same time, the Marxist methodology I had by now found was equally unsatisfactory for different reasons. You see? So I was a bit lost. You can try and imagine this state of mind and feeling I was in. It was not a negative state of mind, it was a positive one, and that is that I could clearly conclude that we have to look for another approach. Now, as regards having come to that point, when I started looking for another approach, one thing was crystal clear to me, which was a paradigm for me, and that is that whatever it be, it must be connected to reality, to objective reality. I was at the same time not going to, by any approach, any methodology, which had its foundations in dogmatic assumptions, that from an earlier age, I was not going to do that. Even though it could be put forth in very attractive terms, with very attractive dressing, and even though it could be sold in decaying bourgeois societies where people were experiencing all kinds of new problems at a personal level or at a group level. But I left that to people like Rajneesh Guru or half a dozen other names will come to your mind in that context. That was not my, I was not going to be party to that. I was looking for connecting to hard, objective reality. That is as far as my empiricism went. And that means that the only way to connect to reality was the scientific fundamentals. I'm using the term scientific fundamentals rather than scientific methodology, because look, the term scientific methodology inevitably includes scientific tools of inquiry, inevitably takes you to the laboratory, which of course was not available for inquiry into human beings and most of their issues, which we were addressing. So, minus this contemporary scientific tools which were available only for more tangible phenomena than the human phenomena, I was still left with scientific fundamentals, which meant a process of reasoning which would come close to an objective logic of reality. Reality does not mean a static state that is observable. Reality means the real processes which make and unmake real things, which meant the logic of reality. So reasoning had to be something, my reasoning had to be something which came very close to objective reality. It could not possibly come as close as I would have liked to come if I could bring human reality under the within the closed doors of a contemporary lab. But then sticking to that approach of looking at reality and not my own assumptions or ideas, a priori ideas, not focusing on them, the next thing was that I could at best come up through my reasoning and collection of relevant knowledge as far as I could, and there are severe limitations upon that, internal and external. So then what I could do to compensate for this handicap was to verify, to check it again and again, and with as much intellectual rigor and as much of an adversarial, a self-adversarial method, which was that my own thinking being an adversary to my own intellectual constructs arrived at earlier, and scrutinize them that way, and then having done that, still keep an open mind and keep monitoring it constantly. And I realized and accepted that that thing would have to go on until we had better tools with which to observe reality and quantify it, and then work out more reliable understanding of the logic of reality. These were my intellectual premises from which I had to proceed. And वो नहीं नहीं
देखते ही नहीं है।
अच्छा सॉरी
अब देखें ऑडियंस एक से ज़्यादा भी हो सकते हैं।
हाँ,
तो अगर वहाँ से यहाँ तक ऑडियंस को एड्रेस करना तो क्या कभी कभी तो इधर देखना चाहिए।
हाँ, ठीक। So on these premises, I hope I've not taken too much time in stating my premise, because I thought I should share the specific approach I adopted. I'm trying to say in my defense that it was not a random and ad hoc approach. It was not utterly eclectic. These were the steps I took. And so now I come back to man, having earlier come to the conclusion that the earlier social approach and the previous dogmatic approach is not going to work. It has got to be something better. I must say that I don't think the path that I took to, it would not have been possible in an earlier time, before the discovery of the Big Bang, before the discovery of the gene, before the discovery of the transistor and computers, and before the developments in evolutionary sciences, and before it was possible to combine with these new bodies of knowledge with history, with human history, and the history of other things as it unfolded from evolutionary sciences, I dare say it would not have been possible to go out in search of a new approach, different from the ones which was available off the shelf. I was aware of that. But having realized that it was available, I felt obliged to pursue that line of inquiry. So when I started to look at man as reality, it was inevitable that I started to look at other living forms, starting with cellular life, and then it's branching out